Frank Grimes, or Grimy as he was often called, was a man who had a tough time in life. He had a lot of bad luck. He worked hard but never got the breaks he deserved. He met Homer Simpson at the nuclear power plant. He just couldn't understand how Homer got away with being so lazy and irresponsible. Grimes was a good example of how life isn't always fair. Even though he was smart and capable, bad things seemed to follow him everywhere. He never gave up, though. He kept trying to make a better life for himself. But meeting Homer Simpson would change everything for him, and not in a good way. Frank Grimes' life was hard from the beginning. He was abandoned as a baby. His parents left when he was 4 years old. He grew up in an orphanage. He had to work hard just to survive. As a young boy, Grimes had to deliver newspapers. He even dug ditches. He was only 12 years old when he had to do these tough jobs. On his 18th birthday, he was blown up in a silo explosion, but Grimes never gave up on his dream of a better life. He studied hard. He wanted to make something of himself. He knew education was the key. Frank Grimes was determined to improve his life. He studied at night while working during the day. He even took correspondence courses. He wanted to learn as much as he could. His hard work paid off. He earned his high school diploma. He studied nuclear physics and passed with a minor. He finally had a chance at a good life. He got a job at the Springfield nuclear power plant. He was excited to start his new career. He was finally going to be a success. Frank Grimes started his new job at the power plant with enthusiasm. He was eager to use his skills. He was ready to work hard. But then he met Homer Simpson. Homer was everything Grimes wasn't. Homer was lazy. Homer was irresponsible. And yet Homer had a good life. Grimes couldn't understand how Homer got away with his behavior. Homer slept on the job. Homer caused accidents. Homer didn't even seem to care about his work. Grimes, on the other hand, followed every rule. He did everything by the book, but Homer seemed to be rewarded for his incompetence. Homer Simpson had a knack for pushing people's buttons. He seemed to have a special talent for annoying Frank Grimes. Homer would eat Grimes' lunches. He would take credit for Grimes' work. He would point the blame on Grimes when doing something wrong. Grimes tried to be patient. He tried to ignore Homer. But Homer's antics were just too much to bear. Grimes started to lose his temper. He couldn't understand why Mr. Burns, the plant owner, didn't fire Homer. It seemed like Homer was untouchable. One evening, Homer invited Grimes to dinner at his house. Grimes was fooled into attending. He was once again annoyed by Homer, but he thought it might be a chance to see Homer outside of work. Maybe he could understand Homer better. The dinner was a disaster. The Simpson house was a mansion compared to Grimes' residence. Homer's family appeared perfect. Homer was his usual oblivious self, bragging about his trip to space and his Grammy Award. Grimes was gobsmacked, but he couldn't hide his disgust. He realized that Homer's home life was just as absurd as his work life. Frank Grimes was determined to expose Homer for the fraud he believed him to be. Grimes tried to tell everyone at the plant about Homer's incompetence. He pointed out Homer's mistakes. He showed how Homer was a danger to himself and others, but no one listened to Grimes. They all thought he was jealous of Homer. They saw Homer as harmless. They thought Grimes was overreacting. Grimes was shocked. He couldn't believe that no one else could see what he saw. The pressure of dealing with Homer Simpson finally became too much for Frank Grimes. He had reached his breaking point. He couldn't understand how the world could be so unfair. He had worked hard his entire life. He had followed the rules. And yet, here he was, miserable and unappreciated. In a moment of madness, Grimes snapped. He ran through the power plant, ranting and raving about Homer. He grabbed a pair of high-voltage electrical wires, claiming he could touch them because he was Homer Simpson. Of course, he was immediately electrocuted. Frank Grimes was dead. Frank Grimes' death was a shock to everyone at the power plant. It was a tragic end to a difficult life. Even Homer seemed affected by it, although he quickly forgot about Grimes and continued his usual antics like falling asleep at Frank Grimes' funeral. Grimes' story became a cautionary tale in Springfield, although not in the way he might have hoped. People still talk about Grimy and his obsession with Homer Simpson, but they often use his story as a reminder to not take life too seriously, which is probably the opposite of what Grimes would have wanted.